All righty, I think we're live now. So welcome to the, I don't know how many Whatcom WRITES anthologies we've had, but welcome to this year's Whatcom WRITES event reading Interconnectedness, inspired by Michael Christie's book Greenwood. Though you're not required to read his book to join this anthology, I highly encourage it because that was our favorite book the year before we picked it for Whatcom Reads. How many of you have read Greenwood? Fantastic. Okay, so no pressure, but lots of peer pressure. Kelly's reading it the fourth time now. I know, that's fantastic. I know it definitely deserves a reread. We've got a plethora of events coming up with Michael Christie on behalf of Greenwood. We're so looking forward to him coming to Bellingham, and he is indefatigable. We're going to do a Chuck and a Radio Hour up at Bellwood Farms. He's going to be at Mount Baker Theater. You have to register for that, but it's going to be free. And a few other events smattered here and there. It's going to culminate with a virtual interview with Kelly Everett, my wife, and one of the other co-owners of the store. That's going to be on Saturday. So the intent is that every event will have something different, and you're always going to hear something good. So I encourage you to read the book and join the events. And I think that is coming to the end of my introduction. And now we're going to bring up our authors. And we're going to start with Beth Anderson, is a Pacific Northwest author who placed in the top 25 new writers for Glimmer Train. Since then, she has stories published in the Saturday Evening Post, the Timberland Regional Library Anthology, and the Juncture Workshops Anthology. And she's here to read her piece, Skipping Class. Beth.
And now I can add Whatcom WRITES to that anthology. Okay, skipping class. I had an appointment. I really did. So I wasn't really skipping class. The appointment just happened to be quick. So the results were negative. Thank you very much. Feeling lifted and non-cancerous, I put my chocolate lab Sadie's halter on for a walk, even if the temperamental skies above decided to let loose in the process. Early spring in the Pacific Northwest will do as it pleases, and today, as I tied my bright red scarf around my neck, I actually dared it to. Sadie, big and brown, led me down our street, puddled and wet. The first massive rhododendron bushes held their buds tightly closed, not quite trusting the cold winter to be over. Sadie saw her before I did, a young Asian woman in a long gray coat that almost touched the sidewalk. Sadie wagged. I smiled. The woman stopped. May I ask you a question? Her soft voice, strongly accented but perfectly understandable. Certainly, I said. She looked at me with calm, hazel eyes. Which direction is the ocean? She asked. I don't have an ocean, but I can show you the Puget Sound, which is connected to the ocean, I offered. You're walking away from it. Come with us, this way. I pointed back to where she came from. She turned around and we passed a barking dog behind a fence. Sadie sniffed and gave a short response, like she does every day, to her fenced friend. The next house had an assortment of cars in the driveway, people's cars, not roofers or landscapers' trucks. My grandmother's in that house, she said, nodding toward it as we passed. She is dying. Her statement surprised me. I wondered if her culture spoke directly or she thought mine did. What is she dying from? I asked. Living, she said. The sidewalk ended. Towering pines and evergreens whipped their branches over our heads. We followed Sadie down a muddy path. I worried about the woman's coat dragging, but she didn't hesitate. Our boots crunched the top layer of pine needles on the soft ground leading to an overlook. Where are you from? I asked. Korea, she said. I'm going back home tomorrow and I need to see the ocean before I leave. I agree, I said. Screaming seagulls soared in the wind. The air carried salt water. The path put us atop a steep bluff, which dropped down to the rocky beach below. A wall of dark clouds threatened us from the south. The sound glittered with gold from the fierce sunlight streaking down. Whitecaps frothed in the shadows. We stood and watched this battle. I took a deep breath. and let out a sigh of strength and happiness to be standing with my dog and this lovely woman on this beautiful spot. I tightened my scarf around my neck. She focused on the stubborn ferry boat chugging its way west toward Kingston, waves crashing against its bow in steady beats. My stomach felt fortunate not to be on that rough ride today. Her smooth face was neither happy nor sad, a warrior princess from an unknown past. A bright, fluffy cloud broke free from the masses and floated out to the diminishing sunstreak. This happy cloud was not dragged by the wind like the other dark clouds. Sadie jerked her head up and appeared to watch this cloud, ears alert. The first loud plops of rain hit my jacket. I pulled my hood over my head. These were only warning drops of the deluge on the way. The young woman didn't show any signs of moving. Her eyes steady on that bright cloud, which frolicked along its own path, not controlled by the wild currents in the sky. Plop, plop. I had dared it after all. I'm going to turn around now, I said. Are you able to find your way back? She nodded without breaking her gaze. Thank you, she said. Sadie ignored my attempts to turn around. She stood frozen, watching with the woman. Finally, she agreed to head down the path toward home.
It was a nice job. Well done. I'm just going to make sure. Can you all hear everything okay back there? Excellent. And you all heard okay there? Great. Good, good. Next up is Tammy Axlen. When Tammy was a child, she started writing poems and songs, and now her favorite genre is children's books. When asked why she writes, she says, I love to create, and if I can touch lives and make a difference doing something I love, then I'm all in. Welcome, Tammy. Give her a big warm up.
All right, I'm just going to read a little bit from the beginning and a little from the end, and you'll have to get the book to read the middle. This is called Becoming. She sat quietly, rocking back and forth in the old patinated rocker, reminiscing on all that had been and meditating on all that was. I watched her from my place in front of the fire, and I waited in ever-growing anticipation for her to speak. I loved the rich tenor of her voice, the sweet cadence of her words, and the tender openness in her expressions. I did not want to miss a moment. My brokenness, a thirsty sponge for her healing waters. She was a storyteller, her nature tales abounding with wisdom only attained by experience, by life, by pain. This is what I had come for, to be filled once more with her faith, her spirit, her hope, with her, with who she was, with who she is. She began to speak. I saw a butterfly, all wound up in her chrysalis and struggling to be free. She wrestled as though wriggling out of a too tight skirt, bumping and sliding and pulling, then pushing away the last remnants of her old self until she at last was free. In her newfound liberty, she began to pump her wings faster, faster as they filled and strengthened and bloomed. Beautifully colored wings, full and wondrous, now carrying her from tree to tree and flower to flower to flower. The first descendants of Madame Butterfly have begun the excursion north, and so will follow her children's children, and then their children. Her progeny will carry on until at last they are home, not back, but home. Grandma falls silent, rocking back and forth with my child, wrapped contentedly in her arms. Deliberately, she looks up, her sharp eyes piercing mine with a perceptive intensity. She knows my story, my struggle, and she speaks the mystery. I see a butterfly thrashing around in her cocoon. As she wrestles, she's strengthened, she's transformed. It is a golden moment, and I dare not set her free. I am that flower, receiving of her goodness, and yet the butterfly expected to propagate it. I think of all she's given me, all that will live on because of our connection. Lips quivering, I whisper, you are so strong, as I lower my head and swallow the lump that has lodged itself in my throat. Look up, child, she says with gentle firmness. At her words, I square my shoulders and I raise my head. As I lift my eyes to hers, she smiles knowingly. That same strength is in you, dear one. I hear what she does not say. Grow, fly, be.
That's lovely, Tammy. Thank you. Next up is Carmella Bowman. I'm going to read very slowly so you can work your way up, Carmella. Is an avid letter writer. Born and raised in Skagit County, she's been a shepherdess in Italy, a winemaker in Austria, on trail crew in Iceland, and was the first in her family to return to her great-great-grandmother's village in Bohemia. She's working on her first novel. We look forward to seeing it.
All right, excerpts from Curfew at the Convent. In my 9th month on a year-long sojourn to Europe, I carved out 30 days to walk the historic Catholic pilgrimage, the Camino de Santiago in Spain. While I was thrilled to travel border to ocean across an entire country, my parents were horrified at my hiking alone. Aside from crossing the Pyrenees Mountains, the Camino doesn't venture into the wild. It winds purposely through towns and villages, so pilgrims have easy access to meals and lodging in refugios. As a single woman, other parties approached me daily, inquiring if I was by myself. When I said yes, they would gasp, and regardless of their country of origin, ask, "Your mother let you do this?" Speaking with my folks, I tried to convey how not alone I was, but no amount of explaining could convince them otherwise. They remained appalled that I was hiking in a foreign place without a partner, map, and compass. As I sat at a cafe table in Lyon, waiting for an irritated server to return with my pathetic order of mint tea, I reflected that this was the first time all day, possibly all week, that I was actually alone. Suddenly, I didn't want to sit at the cafe table any longer or deal with the waiter's exasperated attitude. On impulse, I stood up. As I departed, a surprising sadness enveloped me. It had been several months since I had seen anyone I knew from the States, and I longed for a good American hug. I didn't feel I could embrace any of my new companions and not risk a cultural misinterpretation. My heart ached. Checking my watch, I realized I would make curfew with only minutes to spare. I wove my way to the plaza at the front of the convent. Stepping into the plaza, I heard a group of youth attempting to beatbox and playfully rap in the adjacent corner. They were terrible at it, and their group was in fits of giggles. Mid-plaza and striding purposely, I looked over at them. I couldn't help but grin. Amid the beatboxing, my childhood name wafted toward me. I froze. In Latin countries, I often heard derivatives of my name. Carmen, Carmelita, Carmelina. The beatboxing stopped, and this time my childhood name rang across the quiet plaza. Carmi? Stunned, I turned toward the beatboxing youth. Ben? Dave? Good friends of mine from high school, the Weaver brothers, emerged from the group. "I knew that was you," exclaimed Dave as he rushed toward me, enveloping me in a fierce bear hug. "When you smiled, I knew it had to be you." "We'd heard you were in Europe," said his elder brother, Ben, "but we had no idea you were here." He took his turn to give me a strong and warm embrace. "We're staying at the convent tonight. Are you?" Thank you.
Is that a part of your larger work, Carmella?
It's a part of another larger work. This is nonfiction. This is real.
Yeah. I love it when you can pull an excerpt from an existing piece to fit into a theme, and that one fits in so well. Nice. Next up to read is Heidi Bearley. Did I say her name right?
Close.
Yes, close. Please feel free to correct me. is an artist, writer, and adventurer based in Bellingham, Washington. Her written work has appeared in High Desert Journal, Voice Catcher Journal, and other publications. She is a Pushcart Prize nominee for her short essay, Carnage. She's going to be reading from Winter Work today. Welcome.
My 12th day removing ivy from the Whatcom Creek Trail was gray and cool with temperatures in the mid-40s. I grabbed a runner's stem and lifted and pulled. The places where it tacked the weave of the stems below detached to a branching node. I gripped the stem and pulled until it broke. Ivy had an astringent fragrance, like retsina. The earth smelled of mushrooms. Given ivy's ability to regenerate from stems and roots, I didn't want to leave runners on the wet, spongy ground. I coiled them into a heavy-duty cherry red Lululemon shopping bag with "This is Yoga" printed on it. Sarah Joy, the yoga teacher and therapist who led Hunger, Hope, and Healing, the eating disorder recovery group I'd been participating in since late May, encouraged us to find the middle way, the action that was neither driven nor lethargic. My tendency was toward drivenness, and the bag kept me attentive to pulling only some ivy. My goal in removing the ivy was to keep the area as undisturbed as possible. Any sticks, leaves, rocks, logs, mushrooms, nests, and creatures stayed. And as much as possible, they stayed where I found them. Trash, human detritus, went in the bag. As I shrank the ivy patch, the only evidence that had been there were the ivy leaves that stripped from the stems. Since the leaves wouldn't grow a new plant without stem, I left them to return nutrients to the soil. Gravel crunched under my feet as I walked with the full bag to a dumpster. I'd been talking to Sarah Joy and the other participants in Hunger, Hope, and Healing about removing ivy. To my surprise, ivy's ubiquitousness became a thread of conversation in our support calls. I likened it to the string that connected two cans in a rudimentary telephone. Our energy seemed to travel in the network of the ivy's roots and stems across the nation. Susan in Florida sent me a picture of a pot of ivy in her window. Megan in Boston texted me an image of ivy growing on a wall in the snow and shared a photo of an ivy-inspired ceramic sculpture she made. These connections nourished me and helped me feel that my work in the ivy benefited all communities the plant touched, even as I removed it. And pulling the ivy satisfied my body's craving for physical activity, the area where my tendency was to overdo. The ivy helped me sense my body's hunger and fullness. Satiation was ease. Demand and postponement were urgent, and urgency felt resistant, anxious, and antagonistic. I used a gentle, curious hand on the ivy, and it let go.
Thank you, Heidi. Next up is Claire Bryan. Claire graduated from Western Washington University in 2020 with a BA in creative writing. She's now pursuing a master's in clinical social work at Columbia University. Claire recently moved back to Bellingham after a year on Whidbey Island. She's enjoying reconnecting with her closest friends. Speaking of interconnectedness.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is great. This is Clumpers. If you think this is about you, it probably is. I have loved you, and you, and you, and you too. It doesn't hurt anymore to feel the brevity of the breeze. I no longer have goosebumps, white hairs flat against my forearms. Though there have been moments I wish I could freeze. Like the lake in the winter, not quite sturdy enough to hold all my weight. It fell through, but don't fret, I can breathe underwater. There's seaweed down here. The plushness calls me to sleep. If you think I dream about you alone, I don't. I'm dreaming of that rainbow fish giving away all its scales until they are all but one. We saw a double rainbow yesterday. It led us to the bay, a spectrum shooting out from the depths of the Puget Sound. Those fish must be clumpers, light refracted off their singular scales adhering to each other. Now, here we are at the dinner table. I cried here only once about him, but since then we have laughed ourselves to tears. We have dreamed of that type of orange that reflects off faces at sunset. We have lived as if we are children experiencing the joy of holding worms. We have mourned the pieces of ourselves lost to the wind as we molt. We have taken lost feathers and made a nest. The changing of the seasons breaks it down, but I will always remember this rebirth. I still love you and you and you and you too. If you think this is about you, I'm glad you felt it too.
Claire, that was just beautiful. Thank you. Next up is Nancy Canyon. I was going to say I don't need to read hers because I know her story, but I'm going to read her biography anyway. Award-winning author Nancy Canyon holds an MFA from PLU. She coaches for the Narrative Project and teaches through Chuckanut Writers. Thank you, Nancy. Her books, Saltwater Poetry, and recent novel Celia's Heaven are available at villagebooks.com and up on the shelves. She lives in Bellingham with her artist husband and their cat and dog. And yesterday, day before, we saw her at Stone's Throw Brewery. Good to see you again.
Oh, it's fun to see people I know there and there. Well, thanks Village Books and Whatcom WRITES and Michael Christie for his inspiration. This is an excerpt from my personal essay, Early Girls. The year my dad bought me my first early girl was the same year my birth father drowned in the Deschutes River. I didn't know about the drowning and didn't remember him any more than I remembered my stepfather wasn't my real father. My stepfather was a tall man with a big nose, black glasses, and honking laugh. He had a long gait that I had to run to keep up with. While he shopped for yard tools at the hardware store that spring, I perused the vegetable starts. I fell in love with the tomatoes and talked him into buying me an early girl. The truth of my birth origin wasn't revealed until I turned 16 and my stepbrother, alias cousin, came to live with us. My mother had kept my brothers and my early life secrets so that we could bond as a family. She said she thought I knew about Virgil, but I didn't. I didn't say my birth father, she didn't say my birth father had drowned. So the idea that someday meeting him possessed me. When I think back now on how I felt growing up, I recall stories of stolen kids whose parents were sick with worry while their children began to believe their captors were their real family. The amnesia continued despite unfamiliar physical traits and a background of banking and wheat instead of wild fish from the Columbia and vegetable gardens redolent with tomatoes. I suppose tomatoes were served at the funeral. Sandwiches of homemade bread, roast turkey, tomato slices, lettuce, and pickles. The guests would have looked like my brother and me, curly hair and freckles, long faces with serious eyes. But again, I didn't know about the drowning. I've been re-educated to accept my adopted father as the real McCoy. No one let the truth slip. Years later, while pregnant with my daughter, proof that I'd remained connected to the Mortimers availed itself to me. As I paced the living room, pondering the perfect baby name, Carrie Maria popped into my head. 4 years later, I met my birth family. Grandmother Mortimer smiled as she sat on the sofa beside us. "What is your baby's name?" she said. "Carrie Maria." She laughed. "Your great-grandmother's name is Carrie Mariah." Surprised? I said, "Really?" Grandma nodded. "Huh," I said, perhaps wondering if my great-grandmother also grew early girls.
Oh, thank you. There are. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. One of those things I meant to do and forgot to do. You know, two heads are better than one, and 42 are better than one. Yes. Next up is John Green. And actually, I'm really glad to be sandwiched between Nancy and John because they're both wonderful examples of great literary citizens. They give so much back to the writing community and appreciate not just your writing, but your spirit of giving. John is author of Whimsy Park, children's poems for the whole family, and is widely published in all styles of poetry, especially haiku. John lived in Europe before moving to the United States at age 13. His daughter cooks with spice, and his wife still laughs at his jokes. That's a needful thing. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Paul. Paul's one of the nicest guys besides being an owner of Village Books. And it's not without recognition that these are free. He wouldn't have to give us these free books, but he gives them free year after year. So thanks a lot, Paul. It's really appreciated. My poem is on page 92, if you happen to have a book here. And I'd like to dedicate it to a fellow poet who died last week. She was a regular at the Village Books poetry group. We meet up in the writer's corner the first and third Thursday nights at 5:30, and we became good friends, and she just passed away. She was Dr. Margaret McFadden. She had a PhD in marine biology, so she certainly knew about interconnectedness. This is dedicated to her. Bottom up. Plankton eaten by forage fish. Forage fish dined on by Chinook salmon. Chinook salmon, the southern resident orca whale's exclusive diet. Southern resident orca whales eat over 350 pounds of Chinook a day. Plankton weakening within Puget Sound. Sea levels rise affects currents that sweep away the sandy sediment forage fish live in. Orcapods. Oh, wait a second, I'm sorry. Sea levels rise affect currents that sweep away the sandy sediment forage fish live in. Glaciers melt. Streams get less water. Puget Sound Chinook salmon threatened. Orcapods build immensely strong family bonds over generations. Southern resident orca whale pods at risk of extinction. Stellar sea lions, gray wolf, giant panda, Yellowstone grizzly, bald eagle, peregrine falcon, whooping crane, American bison, Mongolian wild horse, brown pelican, Virginia northern flying squirrel, manatee, American alligator, gray whale. These species were all at risk of extinction, but with our help, they came back. Witness hope, action, not despair. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up is Becca Rose Hall. She studied writing at Stanford and University of Montana. Her work appeared or is forthcoming in Orion Magazine, About Place, and Sparkle and Blink. She won the 2019 Writers Lighthouse Emerging Fiction Fellowship for her novel Salt for Salt. She directs Frog Hollow School, a children's writing program. Yay for writers. Welcome, Becca.
Thank you, everybody. It's really fun to be here. And I'm really excited to read from a book instead of my phone. This doesn't sound like it, but it's actually a novel excerpt as well. Because everything affects everything. If two people, say, feeling a feeling of love, slept together in the duff under a Douglas fir tree on an island hill above the Puget Sound, it influenced the mycelium in the ground underneath them, caused a tremor in the soil, changed the course of a tank-like beetle who was crawling in the duff. Frogs paused a breath. The pulse of the sap flowing up the trunk above them responded slightly, and so the wind moving in the branches changed too. It placed the slightest torque on the curl of each wave in the sea surrounding them, affected each sway of kelp, each shifting grain of sand. And in the movement of the clouds and the moths in the moonlight, the moths' silent visits to the flowers, the glare of the moon on windshields, the timing of car wheel and slug crossing, the words said to gas station clerks, the words overheard by the buyers of late night cigarettes and withered corn dogs, the apprehension of soldiers waiting to deploy, the confidence of commands, the precision of bombs, how smoke obscured the stars in that desert darkness, an imperceptible, utterly unmeasurable, yet present difference. You can't prove there wasn't. You know we're never alone. And there was something of the stars' shyness in their touching, something of smoke and old stone, the tension of explosives waiting to detonate, and the slow, sickening leak from blown bombs, of the western wind blowing in from the straits, over the island and city and steep stone mountains, blowing through Douglas firs and the leaves where the tree frogs, creak and drone. The gas station's clerks' sadnesses, the corn dogs in their case turning like fortune wheels, the pedal curl of slug tentacle, spinning speed of wheel, the reckless joy of that speed, the silence behind all sound. Even you here have been changed. Thank you.
Next up is Patricia G.K. She embraced her passion for writing with a giant hug. Successfully completed 7 NaNoWriMos. That's in November, which is retail's hardest time. So I've never been able to do a NaNoWriMo, so I'm envious. One evolved into her published book, Passage of Vines, Clara, published in multiple anthologies and selected story for Fairhaven Winterfest. Life is grand, she says. Welcome, Patricia.
Hi, everyone. It's really cool to see everyone here. My story is called Time Capsule. And basically the 2 characters are Cassandra, who needed for her to graduate from high school to do volunteer work. Some of us might remember that, some of us maybe not. And her volunteer work involved taking care of or visiting Sarah, who lived at Sunny Tomorrow Nursing Home. And so this is their story. Cassandra tucks her braided red hair under her turquoise hood. She knocks on Sarah's door after hearing a violin concerto drifting through the open door. She was greeted by a woman, slightly stooped, with rounded shoulders, functioning as shelves for her red braided hair. Well, look at you, Cassandra. We have the same red hair and braids. I would be just as tall as you if I could stand taller. would you believe that my favorite color is turquoise? Cassandra's eyes scanned behind Sarah's dangling turquoise earrings to a turquoise and iris upholstered love seat strewn with newspapers, magazines, and letters. Under her shaded windows, a butterfly turquoise quilt covered a single twin bed, functioning as a soft nest for her violin. That was you playing the violin, Cassandra asked. Yes, I was a concertmaster for years. I've played for over 60 years. Cassandra took from the mantle a black and white photograph of a young woman. She wore a long, dark A-line skirt below her knees, a white sweatshirt, and sandal shoes with thick white socks. Next to her stood a football player, a snug leather helmet, pinching his cheeks as he held a football in one hand. He wore a high-waisted pants, knee-high socks, and a form-fitting shirt. Were you a cheerleader? Why, I'm one too. Please sit, said Sarah. It's curious to me how we have so many similarities. I didn't know what to expect from a student volunteer, but look at you. I see my reflection. Your 18 years of life and my 90 years will be our private classroom, sharing and respecting each other's journeys. Our age difference resembles time capsules, mine overflowing with a lifetime of memories, while you're just beginning to fill yours. Sarah reached across the table and touched Cassandra's class ring with her toffee-colored finger, opaque fan-folded wrinkles covering arthritic joints. I'm looking for my small shell-crusted jewelry box with the only rings I own, my class ring, a wedding ring, and my baby girl's ring. Sarah moved her hand up to her crinkled neck where a locket hung. Then touching a tiny spring, she opened the locket and held it out to Cassandra. This is my daughter, her first and last photograph when she was 1 week old. Cassandra sighed. I had a baby sister too. She died when she was 6 months old. So I guess we share the sadness that death has brought to our lives. I know you would have been an amazing mother and, well, I would have been a perfect sister. After graduation, Cassandra visited weekly, and she said to Sarah, I know our ages are different, but I think for me, our friendship taught me ways to face life. Before you, I was scared about getting older. I have learned from listening to you and looking at you so full of life. I am less afraid. Cassandra returned at Christmas break. She was met in the lobby by a pear-shaped woman holding a cylindrical glass tube. A turquoise ribbon read, Cassandra's time capsule. On the bottom, there was a small shell-encrusted jewelry box. And the woman said, Sarah left this for you. Hold fast to her past while you move forward. Fill this with your life memories. Thank you.
It's funny hearing the creaking floor up above. I feel like I'm underground. These are the roots of sound. I don't know. Next up is Sarah Krulak, a lifelong resident of Bellingham. She lives with her partner, Zach, and their 2 cats, Calliope and Tiberius. She enjoys her day job translating complicated text speak for a software consulting company, but prefers time spent with her writing partner, Emily, working on their first novel together. Yeah, who wouldn't? Welcome, Sarah.
I've had to cut around because my piece is a bit long, so it's sort of all over the place what I'll be reading. The piece is called As Fate Would Have It. If you could look fate in the face, what would you say? You have managed what none of your kind ever have before, the women say as one. Though each of the 3 voices is unique in timbre and tone, they harmonize effortlessly. You are the first human to ever stand before us. You may ask one thing of us, but know that what you ask, be it knowledge or a wish granted, will still have a price. A price, I say, unable to keep the scorn from my voice. I've spent my life trying to show a blank mask to the world, always taught that to show emotion was to show weakness. But everything that I know, everything I've been taught, seems to have disappeared, Everything that I am replaced with the smell of blood, the sound of the blade, the sight of my mother being taken from me forever. The knowledge that she's gone and she's never coming back. So I'm truly unable to stop the tidal wave of what comes next. You speak to me of a price to be paid. I have lived my whole life hiding what I am, ashamed of my own weak mortality, spending every second of every day trying to be what I am supposed to be. Then my mother, the only family I've ever had, gives up her freedom to save the daughter she's never known, and the queen killed her anyway. There is a small part of me that can't believe I'm here, using my one audience with the most powerful beings in the realm, just to shove my anger in their faces. But that part of me is not in control. This is your fault, I practically shout, my voice gone shaky with rage. My life could have gone on as it always had. My mother would still be here. You're supposed to be fair, objective rulers, keeping the power balanced in this land. But I know now that, you're spiteful, cruel creatures that look for every opportunity to snip the thread of life as early as possible. There's utter silence. No one was speaking before, but it seems that everyone in the clearing has even ceased to breathe. The fates look at me, really look at me, pale eyes burning with cold fire. You dare think that some action of ours would have saved your mother's life. Suddenly, a powerful wave of magic washes over me, pushing me to my knees. I look up, expecting to be in the forest, but instead I see that everything has disappeared and I'm kneeling in a dark void. Suddenly, the air around me explodes with millions of intricate golden threads, woven in detailed patterns and shapes. Clotho, the youngest fate, steps forward. These are the threads of fate, she says, speaking alone for the first time, and it's strange not to hear her words echoed by the others. Lachesis, the weaver, walks over and pulls on a thread, and I feel as if someone has reached into my chest and put their hand in my rib cage. Not painful, just deeply unsettling. This is your thread. I can't help but look and see all of the threads that are connected with mine, some so tightly interwoven that I can hardly tell where mine ends and the others begin. While most of the threads are golden, I see one that branches off of mine that has dimmed. Lachesis seems to have noticed me looking at it and takes it between her fingers. When she touches it, it comes free of the rest of the web, as if cut with precision. Your mother's time had come. The eldest of the fates, Atropos, steps forward. Nothing could have changed that. Her voice, still strong despite how old she appears, is almost gentle. You lost your mother, but you gained a sister. While my sisters and I can see all possible futures, we have only the smallest influence. And when we can, we strive for balance. The life you have lived was the most balanced option for all involved. We hope you have learned something, the fates say. Once again, they speak together. Fate is neither cruel nor kind. Everyone and everything is connected, and one simple action can change so much, but nothing can mend what has long been severed. I know they are waiting for me to say something, anything. But while I understand that this lesson may help me in the days to come, today all I can do is grieve for what I've lost and be grateful for what I still have. I look fate in the face and I have nothing else to say. Thank you.
Next up is Becky Mandelbaum. She's the author of The Bright Side Sanctuary for Animals. Love that book. And Bad Kansas. Haven't read it yet. Which received the 2016 Flannery O'Connor Award for Short Fiction. Her writing has appeared in One Story, The Sun, the Missouri Review, the Georgia Review, McSweeney's Internet Tendency, and elsewhere. A fellow transplant from the Midwest, originally from Kansas, she now lives in Bellingham. Welcome, Becky. Corresponded a lot with
Yeah, no, it's wild to finally meet you. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. I'm a prose writer, but I have a pandemic poem today. It's called Listen for the Knock. Some say Washington is a bog in winter, all leaky crybaby clouds and sky the color of mushroom soup. What they don't know is that the sunny days burn brighter. We cherish them like hot sticky buns after days of famine, licking sugared sunlight off of our fingers. All my friends refuse to move here because they're afraid of the dark. If this place has taught me anything, it's how to walk through the dark. Think caterpillar on a high wire, the world a blur of color way below. The trick is confidence, patience, a belief that the next inch will bring you closer to the end where the light begins. My first winter, I didn't believe in the end. I fought the shadows, cried myself crazy, begged the clocks to fast forward to April. None of it worked, and I stumbled into spring like a drunk, head ringing as the daffodils turned their heads to gossip. The second winter, I learned a little. You just go out in the rain, my boyfriend told me, as the sky retched itself onto the muddy earth. So right. You're not made of paper, he said. You'll survive. This time I listened, let him pull me into the mountains, the Appaloosa snow speckled with mud and rock, the Nooksack choked with puzzles of ice. My fingers froze, pockets filled with rain, but the birds still opened their throats and the river still carried life from high to low, a season-long carve on a violinist's bow. Back home, the fire felt like God herself, the ginger cookies like minor goddesses, and I was happy. This sickly winter is the same but different. A wolf has eaten the season whole, the world a struggling grandma in a tar dark rib cage, every hour midnight. It seems like ages until anyone will wake up, until the wolf will open his maw to reveal a pair of blinking eyes, until anything nice might happen. But I've learned my lesson. The only way through it is through it. Chin lifted, eyes open, heart beating. Wait an hour, wait 2. We know how the story ends. We will not be here forever. Soon Indian plum, soon butterfly, soon snowmelt. All we have to do is sit quiet in the dark, veins full of hope. All we have to do is listen for the knock. Thank you.
Becky's recently joined us, our Chucking It Writers program, teaching to our writing community. I know we have a few others here. Thank you, Robert, for that. Nancy, did I leave anybody else out? I know we have other writers here. Yeah. Next up is Marie Nyes.
Yes.
Yes. My name doesn't get mispronounced, but it gets misspelled a lot. So I always try to be very good about it. Marie is a joyful, eclectic, and adventurous woman tenaciously devoted to empowering herself and others. She's an optician by day, writer by night, and an outdoor enthusiast at heart. Has a BA in psychology and currently resides with her son and daughter in Bellingham.
Hello. It's very special to be here with all you writers and all the wonderful words. Thank you so much. I grew up on Vancouver Island, so Greenwood spoke to me with all the references to the forests. So this poem I wrote is based on a childhood memory. It's called Ushering in Obsidian. There in the triangular yard stands the tallest tree inside this corner of our block. After the sprinklers cease sprinkling and all the intermittent hissing has halted, the sparks arrive. You can see them in the shadows, find them on the branches, and see moonlight sparking off those mischievous obsidian eyes as they flicker against the trunk of dissent. And there they gather like a family of storms, and they ask upon approach, may we step up these steps? Won't you retreat? May we step up these stairs? Clever paws ascend ruby red planks, ringed tails dragging behind. The bandit's claws click, masked stares corner the tabby on the uppermost landing. The cat jumps on the porch rail, yowls to come inside, ushering in defeat. He abandons his meal. The door opens for the feline, now in a warm kitchen, nonetheless forlorn. He's lost again to the gaze of raccoons, those clever creatures with mysterious vocalizations. The boars and sows and kits are predictable in their fondness for the crunchy kibbles that get sprinkled into his olive-colored dish. The tabby's hopes are rekindled when the copper-haired girl mixes salmon salad for her sandwich. She glances out the window and knowing, draws her hand along her pet's spine as if to replace his lost pride with appreciation. She places fish into a porcelain bowl with stars painted all the way round. Tomorrow her uncle will come to fall the tallest tree inside this flock. It's a wind risk, he said, and the coon's home, she lamented. She's thankful for their plundered feast and for their instincts to navigate this interlaced world, flinty by its very nature.
Such good imagery. Thank you. Next up is Aaron C. Palmer, who writes edgy cross-genre, long and short-form fiction and screenplays filled with gripping scenes and lively characters. He finds inspiration from family, hiking the rugged Pacific Northwest trails with his squirrel-crazy pup. Varied life experiences have fed my desire to share the truth I find in my fiction. That's what he says. Published by Tolosa Press, Sidekick Press, and various underground media. Welcome, Aaron. Aaron?
Thanks for this opportunity. I'll read a couple pages from my dystopian tale of interconnectedness, pandemic of sound. Year 2037. My integrated personal computer, or IPC, buzzed. I glanced at the news banner. Breaking, a steady, mysterious sound has been now heard on every continent. Story developing. Is this a joke? I wasn't hearing anything. Our 3D printed pod houses mirrored the base we'd be using on Mars as part of the 7th wave of the terraforming program. I went across the hall to Ty's living space and peered into his biometric iris scanner. We were both 30, but different as salt and cardamom. He was the leader of the interplanetary terraform team. I headed up software development, writing all the source code for the project. His door lit up into a life-size screen featuring his pale, gaunt face. Tumblers clicked open and he waved me in. I walked into his office where his wall displayed multiple HD worldwide news feeds. He spun his air chair around with a flourish. It's everywhere. Can you hear it? Ty asked. No, you? Nothing. But our pod walls are nearly 2 feet thick and we can't go out because of our quarantine. I stared at the screens. My mind whirled with unease. Religious groups are claiming that the strange sound is the clarion call of the 7 trumpets from Revelation. Jesus. Exactly, Ty smirked. Glitch in the matrix, I chuckled. Ty snorted and pointed to the news reports. Theories abound. Could be a chain reaction triggered by a nuke test or a meltdown by a third world nuclear reactor. The Space Force is looking into the possibility that one of the giant sun deflector satellites created a vibration frequency that's causing a sympathetic resonance with the other 25,000 deflectors. Maybe the carbon dioxide converter circling the equator had been taken over by aliens. He grinned. NASA hypothesizes that it came from a powerful solar flare that has enveloped our atmosphere, thus creating an imbalance in our electromagnetic polarity. Would it affect the mission? I asked. He gazed at his reports. Mars is not experiencing anything unusual. Well, that's good. I bit my cheek. We are scheduled to blast off on Starship 42 in 2 days. I'm going with NASA's Reed. Ty yawned. The video wall showed religious sites around the world filling up with believers, all praying for guidance or possibly a front row seat to the apocalypse. I felt an urgent need to call my off and on girlfriend Avery. Don't do it, Ty shook his head. He knew me well. Avery's sly green eyes and full lips always turned my brain to mush. If she reeled me back in, I might break quarantine and skip out on the Mars job. It was important work. Our new terraforming technology would be 10 times faster than what the environmental scientists were currently using on the Red Planet or on Earth. The job paid $1 million upon liftoff and $4 million upon completion in 5 years. I imagined sipping Mai Tais with Avery on a pristine Pacific beach on the Gulf of Arizona and smiled.
Next up is Abby Rolnick. You know, I read these biographies for two reasons. One, they're really well written. It's fun to get to know people. Having this theme of interconnectedness, we don't just get to know each other through our writing, but having this biography, we get to know each other even better. Hopefully you'll finding somebody that you want to connect with and join a writing group with. I know I need that, and it's always good to get out of your cave and meet others. So thank you for these wonderfully written biographies in addition to your submissions. It helps us get to know you even better. So Abby grew up in the suburbs of Baltimore. After attending Boston University, she lived in Puerto Rico, where she owned a bookstore. Her writings include 3 novels in the Generation Secret series, as well as Cocoon of Cancer, An Invitation to Love Deeply, Tattletales, Essays and Stories Along the Way, and Bubby's Magical Hair. Abby resides in Skagit Valley, Washington, and she didn't put this in here, but she was the first employee at Village Books. Welcome, Abby.
Hi, everybody. There's my sister. Yay! Well, I'm old. Can you still hear me with this being up high? Okay, good. So I feel a little bit old now, over 40 years here, but this is an excerpt from my novel, Founding Stones, and I've had to cut it down really short to fit into the time. Here we go. Roots have memories. 1905 Kiev, a year and a place young Abraham would never forget. He ran from gaslight pole to gaslight pole, traveling 20 miles an evening. His city, awash with chaotic and crazy fabricated anti-Jewish riots, forced family after family to leave southern Russia. He left Hamburg, Germany, and he slept at a safe house till he reached port where in 3 weeks the Bulgaria set sail. He left behind the pogroms and with it its 7 dead siblings and his feeble and tormented parents. Abraham's haversack held falsified papers. His practiced English and Spanish sounded passable to the uneducated ear. For the last time, he reviewed the sacred Torah's words. From now on, he'd be a Christian. Oh, may God forgive him and save his life for a good purpose. Abraham memorized smells, the movement of the wind. He foraged mushrooms, ate roots. He emerged from the transcontinental ship as Jose. Storm weather blew the ship off course. Instead of New York, he entered the coast of Costa Rica, a nobody to become somebody. 2 generations later, Joseph, the grandson of Abraham, had settled in the Skagit Valley. Joseph waited. He knew from experience that to move when his heart raced faster than his mind, errors followed. His grandfather's instructions warned of fragility. To rise from the latest work of the fine roots, the fruiting body of the mushroom needed energy. His experiments in the woods were harder to replicate indoors. Still shaking from his encounter in town, Joseph chided himself for his self-righteous display of justice with the 2 insolent teens. Joseph's worry came from the fungal mindset. One of his grandfather's cardinal rules had been to understand life, one had to treat everything with the same sensitivity as that of the mycelia. He took down his grandfather's old notebook with studies of mushrooms from Russia and Costa Rica, tattered with spore prints, scribbled drawings of plants. One entry described the forest as his grandfather ran. When you run through the forest, they keep up. The mycelia know you are there. I can hide from the police, but the mycelia show themselves. Joseph forced himself to concentrate, heeding his grandfather's warning of misidentifying the mushroom fruit. I lay still for hours, the world coming in upon me. I could hear my heartbeat, but couldn't move. Do not eat the caps found near landslides or near sugared soil. Joseph sought fungi that solved human problems. Since the death of Hannah's sister, Joseph concentrated on curing cancer. Tired and still unsettled, he looked forward to the quiet of the kitchen. As he sliced onions, his eyes teared. The sizzling of spices muffled the music of the stone path. The water droplets created the background beat, and the fry pan juices popping as a counterpoint. Just in case Louise appeared, Joseph threw more vegetables in the pan and opened another vacuum pack of smoked salmon. 20 minutes later, he heard 3 knocks on the door and then call, "Joseph, it's me, Louise. Am I welcome?" Joseph smiled. "Come in. I hope to be back here for the night." The door swung open and the smile slipped off Joseph's face. Joseph noted the split lip, the puffed right eye, and the torn t-shirt. "I expect you're hungry after a long day of work." Joseph set the food on the table. "Eat. The food will loosen your tongue and the potato latkes might stop your hands from shaking. That is if you want to talk." "I don't have anything to say. Yes, I'm hungry if that's what you want to hear." "Ah," Joseph nodded. "If you want to be angry, you better eat. Anger wastes energy and you'll need yours. While you decide, I'll tell you about potato latkes. One day when I was really young and my father came home from working at the railroad yard, he welded the rails for quick turnaround of the silk trains. There had been a fight between the workers brought in from Costa Rica and the regular employees. My father sat in the corner of one-room apartment from what I thought was an eternity. Finally, he got up and started chopping onions, grating potatoes, adding eggs, breadcrumbs to form patties. As they fried, he said to me, potato latkes come from the old country. Don't waste energy on what you can't change." Louise looked at Joseph. "So did the potato latkes fix the problem at the railroad station?" Joseph dished up the food and shook his head. "No, of course not. They just reminded my father that he was better off than his father. More important, they tasted good."
Thank you, Abby. Somebody was speculating today with the repurposing and recycling of clothing that we do, that if we will start to see old masks made into clothing. Next up is Catherine Zupano. She's a Pisces and poet in Washington State. She received her bachelor's degree in creative writing from Western and is co-editor-in-chief of Dollar Store magazine. She lives with her partner and too many houseplants. Catherine. Oh, here you are. Good.
Hi, thanks for being here, everybody. This is beginning. When I was young, we studied ancient peoples in school. The oldest civilizations would look up at the stars and imagine gods and goddesses walking among them, creating, destroying. How else could life be explained? Then society advanced and we abandoned those gods and the stars, let them fade into myth. This is our beginning. The universe expanded and cooled, planets formed, and life just began, evolved. We can't explain the intricacies of our existence. We just live. But everything returns to the stars. Constellations tell stories of galaxies older than the tallest trees. The tides bow to the moon. Those ancient civilizations, all over the world, all imagined gods in the sky. Everything alive would cease to exist without the sun, our largest star. Each tide on the globe ebbs and flows with the moon. We use the night sky to navigate our way through the world. We die, our bodies return to the earth. Our essence returns to the stars. We always return to the stars. Thank you.
How very appropriate that we end with the beginning. Thank you. So we have come to the end of today's reading. Thank you so much for joining us today. You guys made it all the way through. Fantastic. Well. So as John pointed out, yes, each author gets a copy of this book. If you haven't picked one up, we're going to have them at the back counter. We'll check your name off the list and get you a copy. We believe in writers getting paid for their work, even if it's just getting a copy of the book. Each copy of that we do sell is the proceeds are all going to Whatcom Reads and Whatcom Writes for more publishing and supporting more writers. So thank you for this. And I don't know if you saw, but there's an original piece from Michael Christie in here. It's the very first piece, Into the Woods. So you are published as alongside Michael Christie. That's one of the very nice things.
1 degree.
And I think that's it. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you for joining us online. And we'll hope to see you next week and for all the Whatcom Reads. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great.